We welcome in Joe Maxwell, the Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of Farm Action Fund, one of the major endeavors that he's part of. Welcome. It's good to talk to you. We go back a long, long way. I knew you in another life when we both were doing something else. And I want to set this up by letting everybody know we're working this on the fly. You're stuck between a delayed flight in St. Louis and I'm joining from an office room that I stole at my in-laws' house in Tampa as we've done a Florida spring break trip as my kids were off this week. So nice to talk to you again.
It's great to talk with you, Dave, and good to catch up. Really appreciate this opportunity to be on. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about a couple of issues I want to talk to you about, and then of course we'll dive into your previous political career as it kind of threads itself into your current focus. But Farm Action Fund, you're watching. You all are involved and pay attention to a lot of ag policies, but also beyond that as well, coming out of DC. But talk a little bit about what the organization does.
Yeah, thank you. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of Farm Action, and I'm the president of Farm Action Fund. Just to kind of clear that up, Dave, I wasn't clear probably in the pre-conversation. Farm Action is a think tank and research advocacy organization that looks at the power struggle within the food and agriculture chain. By that, I mean the corporate power and how it impacts farmers, workers, the smaller grocery stores, smaller processors. Farm Action Fund is the organization that then takes those ideas and we develop it into legislative amendments, legislative packages, and then try to get those sponsored in Washington, D.C. to make change on behalf of rural communities around the country.
Last week, Secretary Tom Vilsack announced the changes with product of U.S.A, kind of made in the U.S.A, so we know on the label and some of our food where it's coming from. You're on board with this. Why? And what does it mean?
Absolutely. About 6 years ago, almost 7 now, Angela Huffman, who is the president of Farm Action, her and I joined together along with the American Grass-Fed Association, Kerry Balcom, and we recognized there was a huge loophole. So much of our beef and pork is controlled by multinational corporations that have operations around the world. And because mandatory country of origin labeling had been repealed for beef and pork, those companies were able to bring imported meat into the United States, rewrap it, don't do anything else to it, just put it in a different package and be able to stamp it with product of the USA. American consumers were buying those products, believing they were supporting America's farmers and ranchers. So we began the process of saying that's just wrong. It's wrong to steal that market opportunity away from the farmer and the rancher, and it's wrong to lie to the consumer about what's in that package, that meat is maybe Australian, it could be Brazilian, it could be Argentinian, it comes from anywhere in the world, but it's not coming from the United States. So we began that process on behalf of America's farmers and ranchers and the consumers in the United States to have transparency and truthfulness in the labeling process at USDA.
Big picture, how are consumers, what can they be guaranteed now with this change?
Yeah, well, in January 1st, 2026 is when the companies have to have their labels changed, not that they won't begin to change prior to that. But on that date, every package that bears the American flag or the name product of the USA, of beef and pork or meat products in that grocery store, will have been raised, will have been born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the United States. So America's workers will have handled that meat, have been the cutters on that meat, the packagers of that meat, and the farmers and ranchers in the United States will be the ones that have raised those animals. So consumers can be assured that they are supporting America's farmers and ranchers and workers, and they're getting a higher quality product in the process.
And so this is coming out. We'll wait till it fully kicks in. I know you're watching the Farm Bill. It's overdue here. We're waiting on the new version and it hasn't happened yet. As you well know, Congress is not always the most efficient body getting things done. A lot of factors going on there. What do you want to see in this new Farm Bill?
Yeah. But one, again, on the product of the USA, we look towards policies that support the independent farmer and the rancher, and not the industrial agricultural conglomerates that have been developed in the United States. We want to see, right now, the United States is operating at a record trade deficit in agriculture. Now, Dave, we've always bragged in the United States about being this big agricultural powerhouse. The reality is we're importing more agricultural goods than we're exporting. And one of the main reasons is the dollar in the United States. The difference in our dollar value is higher. But another big factor is we're no longer raising food. We're raising feed. Now, I'm a farmer, but the fact is that most of our acres out across the Midwest, there's corn and soybeans and wheat. And then down south, we got cotton, and then up north, we got sugar beets. But we're not raising food. We're importing the majority of our vegetables and our fruits that we eat. They're coming from thousands and thousands of miles away, and is attributing to a trade deficit. We've driven, because of our ag policy, we have driven the production of vegetables and fruits out of the United States, becoming dependent upon China and Mexico. So one of the things that we're really focused on is to bring back balance in the subsidy programs, in the government programs that support agriculture, balancing that between the feed crops and the food crops. Clearly, the United States should be able to feed itself. That is a national security. It's a food security, a national security issue that we're heavily focused on, and getting these subsidies to focus back and balance out. It's also good for beginning farmers and small farmers. The vegetables and fruits are more profitable and have the ability to bring income back to the rural communities. So it also has a benefit at the bottom line for the smaller farmer.
So what does balance mean to you?
Balance means that when we wake up in the morning, we don't just think about corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, and sugar beets. That at USDA, they wake up in the morning, they think about feeding us as well. So I think to us, it's a systemic change as much as it is policy change. We have to focus on risk management tools. Right now, if I'm a small farmer with multiple vegetables, I can't access the same types of risk management tools through the insurance programs, crop insurance programs. So balance means to us, if a farmer's raising food crops, they should have the same opportunity to access the technology, the ability to understand how to use those programs in order to secure the loans they need at the bank, in order to feed us here in the United States. So balance means to make sure that when we look at risk management, insurance, crop insurance programs, that they have this specialty crop folks, vegetable and fruit folks have the same opportunity to have that risk management, that security that they need in order to go forward with the operation. When we look at disaster payments, and as extreme weather's happening out here, that they have the same ability to access those type of disaster payments that we do. I have row crop, so as I say, we farmers like myself have access to for our corn, soybeans, and wheat in the Midwest. So that's what it means to balance. There should not be this. We're right now, you probably don't know, but let me tell you, there's a separate title for fruits and vegetables, and it's called specialty. I've used that term in this specialty crop. It's how we eat. It's what feeds us. We've developed a whole system of agriculture that puts those as something else. And we're just saying they need to be right in line with everything else. That's balance.
Well, as part of this balance, how do you view our commitment to fuel? As you know, you talked about corn. A lot of that corn goes toward renewable fuel. Is that the right focus for the future?
I think that for fuel, for being dependent upon one source of anything is not a good plan for national security or for the growth of this country. I think from oil and gas to renewables, I think the United States policy needs to be one that's balanced, and it does need to have, as part of that, the renewable fuels that agriculture can produce. We also are very strong in the ability of farms to be able to have make profit centers out of wind or solar, to be able to connect to the grid and be able to help fuel the future with those types of alternative. We think agriculture has a place to be and needs to have that respect in Washington, D.C. And right now, that's been going very well. The thing on the food crops is that we just cannot, as a country, rely on others to feed us. That we saw that in COVID. A trade dispute with Mexico would disrupt most all the vegetables and fruits in your grocery store right now. And that's not a good place for the United States to find itself. So we're asking for balance. Another issue I just want to mention is right now there's 4 companies that control beef in the United States. 85% of the beef market, cattle market, is controlled by 4 companies. Under the Trump administration, the Packers and Stockyards Act, which is the law that protects farmers against the power of these large meat packers, was relegated to a program and stripped of most of its funding. So we don't have at USDA the tool we need to really protect the farmer and the rancher when they go into the beef market or pork market. And so the other thing we're wanting to do is to have a special investigator to beef up, if you will, beef up the Packers and Stockyards Act program in order to be able to gain subpoenas, to be able to protect the farmers. We're working on rules right now at USDA that would give additional support. But I think it's important for us to always talk about balance. It's also balance in the marketplace, balance between the power that a farmer has or a rancher has when they go into the market as compared to the power of the one going to do the buying. And so we're looking at balancing, we're calling for balance of that power through additional support at the Packers within the Packers and Stockyards program. So that's our approach. We don't think you're going to ever do away with what's here, but it has to be balanced and the power has to be shifted. So those are our 2 focus areas that we're working on.
We segue completely away from Farm Bill. How much pressure do you think exists in DC as we look at, you've got, the Republican dynamic here of there's too much government, got to pull back on spending. Is that going to be a factor in what this final Farm Bill looks like, do you think?
Yeah, it's a real challenge right now on the Farm Bill. There's a baseline budget. There's a baseline number that is represents the Farm Bill. So every time you hear someone wanting to, let's say, increase reference pricing is a big call among some in DC. That money has to come from somebody else. 80% of the PLC, the reference pricing portion of the bill, of the Farm Bill, 80% goes to 10% of the farmers. And to increase the amount that goes to 10% of the farmers at the expense of 90% of the farmers is something that we don't support. But that issue is one of the issues, along with the IRA funds, that's been holding up the passage of the Farm Bill. And we are on the side of you can't spend that much money on that specific segment of agriculture. We also have done the research to indicate that ultimately that 10% of the farmers that get 80% of the money, in 1 year, within a year, it won't have helped them. We have evidence, we've written about it. These suppliers, seed companies, fertilizer companies, they use the price, 50% of Mosaic, which is a fertilizer company, 50% of their cost model, their pricing model, what they're going to charge a farmer is based upon how much the farmer makes. There's only 4 companies that control 75% of fertilizer in the United States. They set the price they want to extract all the wealth that they can out of that farmer's pocket. It's like a little dog chasing its tail. We can increase reference pricing to support farmers because of higher input costs. And within a year, those companies are simply going to raise their prices because they can. There's only 4 of them. There's the basics, dynamics of supply and demand isn't working. The fundamentals just don't work when 4 companies control a market. And so with reference pricing, 1 year fix, and then all we did was subsidize the largest companies in the world: Bayer, Monsanto, Syngenta, Mosaic, Koch Industries. Those are the large suppliers. There's others within the seed, chemical, and fertilizer area. And they base their pricing. They're going to charge a farmer on how much the farmer is going to make. And therefore, that extractive model will guarantee the farmer always needs increases from government. So ultimately, they subsidize price increases by the largest corporations in the world, agriculture corporations. That's the issue that's holding up, one of the issues that's holding up the farm bill.
So how, it's not unique to agriculture where you have fewer and fewer, but bigger and bigger companies out there. Is the appetite, is the political will there to change for what your organization is trying to do? Is it consumers that drive this? Is the advocates? Who do you think would change this structure, since this is, I appreciate you can get into the nuances of this, but more broadly, you know, we have mega companies now in so many different sectors. Isn't that just what it is now? What's going to change that?
Well, what's going to change it is the American people and putting pressure on their government. Today, our government, in many respects, responds quickly to the wealthiest corporations in the world. They're the ones that do the fundraisers. They're the ones that have the influence at the Capitol. That is changing. Polling surveys that we're part of indicate the American people know who's really screwing them and causing this inflation. And that's this corporate greed. This inflationary period we're in, JBS, a Brazilian beef company, has record profit after record profit after record profit. Farmers are paid less and less for their products, and JBS is putting all the money in the pocket, extracting it out of the consumer's pocket and out of the farmer's pocket. So the consumers are much more aware. The Biden administration has really leaned in on corporate greed, corporate power. There's a Assistant Attorney General Cantor was appointed to take on these areas. Lena Khan is now the chair of FTC and is working diligently to push back against this corporate power, to give relief to the consumers in the United States, to break up that corporate power, restore it back into the food chain. DOJ, for the first time in history, just to give you an example, I don't have a lot of time here, but understand there's something called the tournament system. And if you're a contract grower for a poultry integrator, a poultry processor like Pilgrim's Pride or Puritan or one of those, you raise their chickens. They're not your chickens. You just own a building. You're a contract grower for a major corporation. Those companies developed a system called the tournament system. They put an amount of money in the contract, but then there's a clause in that contract, but we can pay you less if you don't perform well. So then they take all the farmers and put them together, and they give, if you don't perform to some baseline, they give your money to another farmer that did. But the problem is, you, the farmer, have no control. You don't get to select the chickens. You have to raise them exactly how they say, and you got to take their feed. All you are is the worker, the manure handler, and the worker in the building during the period of time the chicken's there. It's completely out of your control. So when the company sends you molded feed and your chickens get sick, you take the penalty. So the company has built a system called the tournament system that they never had the risk. They can screw up the feed. They can screw up the conditions for which the chicken's raised, and they penalize the poor farmer that's got over $1 million borrowed. So that's called the tournament system. DOJ, for the first time in history, under Cantor's watch, enacted the Packers and Stockyards Act. That's administered over at U.S.A. And DOJ said we have the power to bring that into our toolbox. And for 15% of America's chicken farmers, they banned the tournament system. May not seem like a lot to most of those listening here, but if you're one of those chicken farmers, it's your livelihood. It was everything. FTC has taken on the Kroger-Albertson merger. We just got the product of the U.S.A. rules through USDA. So we're seeing action in Washington, D.C., but it's rooted because the people are beginning to wake up and realize these companies are robbing them blind at the grocery store or everywhere else out there. Like you said, it's in every sector. We're focused on agriculture and food. We think that that should be the priority for Washington, D.C. to break up because it's a food security and national security issue. People have to eat. We may not like it. I've got 2 cell phones, but we don't have to have 2 cell phones, but we have to have a meal.
You know, you have to catch your flight. So let me end with this. I'll go back to the how I met you 25, 30 years ago when you were a state legislator. So you were in the Missouri legislature. You ascended to lieutenant governor before you got out of politics. As you stand here now, you're almost 20 years out of elected office, I think, if my math is right. Are you more or less optimistic about the political system than you were when you were directly in it?
I think I would be today going into a presidential election year, speaking over on my 501c4 Farm Action Fund hat. I'm less optimistic. I think that this country is severely divided and there's a lack of leadership to bring people back together. But it's also the people. It's not just the elected folks. We're divided as a society and as people, and we aren't willing to sit down any longer and have a conversation. When you were covering our actions in the state of Missouri, in Jefferson City, Missouri, you know, we would sit down with the other side and we'd have a conversation. Today, I have seen U.S. senators on opposite sides of the aisle having to meet in the back so they aren't seen because their people that support them would rant if they knew they actually talked to that senator, the other senator. So I'm less optimistic, but I would like to say that that lack of optimism is because of where we, the people, find ourselves, our unwillingness to listen, to be willing to say the word compromise, to understanding that winning a little bit here and moving us forward is well worth the conversation. I do think that over time we can heal that. I think we're a great nation and a great people, but it's something we, the people, need to be working on.
Well, we appreciate your time. I wish you good luck here as you try to navigate your travels. And I appreciate you taking us through some issues here. Good to catch up again.
Good to catch up. Hopefully you catch up with me again. I'll reach out. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you much.